Om Nityo Nichanam Chetanas Chetananam Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadati Kaman Tamatmastvam Yenu Pashanti Dhiraha Tesham Shantihi Shashvati Netaresham. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. That one who is the eternal in all non-eternal things, who is the intelligence in all the intelligent ones, who, though one and indivisible, yet fulfills the desires of the many. The wise perceive this, that one, abiding within their own hearts and minds. To them belong eternal peace, and to none else, to none else. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. I'm Guru Pyo Namaha. So, back to the encomium. I have to admit that when we got started, when I had the idea to present these classes, my thought was, oh, there's almost a very long series. We'll take, 2-3 verses each time we meet, but it's really not turning out to that like that. It's like we take one and we unwrap it deeply. And in fact, the one for this week has so much to it that we may not even get all the way through. So let me go ahead and do kind of a quick little review here. So the Verses of the Encomium started out as a way of coalescing all the different chapters of a proposed book called Sword of the Goddess. And in the Sword of the Goddess, there were chapters that had to do with obstacles and chapters that had to do with solutions. And so Babaji put them, usually 2 to each verse, but sometimes 3 in each verse, so that we had a verse that throws out what an obstacle is and throws out its a solution for it. Now, as I started reading this for the first time in many, many years, what came out was the nature of the person saying this. The speaker of this poem, of this Stotram, really, is an enlightened being. And she has the memory of all their past lives, and has the memory of the different kinds of practices and the kind of obstacles that they encountered, and what it was like to live in the different kinds of bardos, whether it was in the ancestor realm or in different heavenly realms. And that's going to come to the fore in tonight's class. So he's got this great divine Daivi Smriti, or Daivi Smrita, I'm not sure whether it's A or E in this case, that Babaji talks about all the time. He's got full access to all of this, or she. So, we're going to continue with this perspective. And in the first class, let me throw up the verses. In the first class, we saw that the singer of this stotram is talking about how even before he came into the play of relativity and multiplicity, he has that memory, and that he would do it through the 4 states of consciousness. And he remembered the mother of wisdom, or the mother of wisdom reminded me of the 2 who are one, and I meditated on them devoutly. So he's getting ready to do this. He's having the memory of what it was like to be floating in the cosmic mother's womb, and not only one with her, but identified with with the whole of consciousness. And so in tonight's class, we're going to look at this second one. Then, while associating with the body, the two limiting powers of Maya beset my mind and senses, but I remembered the Divine Mother of the universe and rested in her two priceless jewels. So, just ever so briefly, these two limiting powers are Avarana Shakti and Vikshepa Shakti. And if you ever get these two mixed up, I once heard Anurag give a good way to remember them, which was Vikshepa sounds like shape, right? So that's the distorting power, throwing up concepts and objects and whatnot. And Avarana then must be the covering power. So these are limiting powers. Usually when we hear them, we're thinking in terms of the mind, which we should, but we're thinking just negatively and how it's creating problems in our life. But these are cosmic imperatives. There's no way to have a universe of name and form, to have the heavens, much less the physical realms, without this power of covering indivisible reality and the power of then distorting or projecting. So think of them right now cosmologically. So this is how the Divine Mother, using her power of Maya, creates the universe or projects the universe and creates all these different upadis. You'll remember that word, things that give a shape or a tone or a flavor or to reality that is homogeneous. So let's think about what it's like. When Divine Mother uses them, we get the universe at all levels. Now there's no value, there's no judgment placed on this. It's just the universe. Here, this is your garden, and here are all your various toys that you can use, from cosmic mind to intellect to here's an ego, so you can, have a vehicle to be an individual for a while. And here's the senses, and here's the mind, and here are the elements, so that you can get out there and create. It's like giving us cosmic Play-Doh. And so that's what it's like when she does it. And when enlightened beings encounter these powers of Avarana and Vikshepa, depending upon their temperament, they will know them as their own powers. Being enlightened, they realize their identity as not only Brahman, but also the power of Brahman. So those powers are theirs. So they use these powers of projection and creation and cover, they have to cover things up a little bit if they're going to be an individual. And it's used for Atmic Sankalpa, which we've gone through, as opposed to Mayic Sankalpa. And when the devotees use these, they see these, then, because they aren't fully enlightened yet, they will take refuge in the mother and gain detachment from them as they, work their way towards enlightenment. But everyone else is in ignorance. And so instead of sporting in this vast, unlimited garden, they are suffering and having pleasure back and forth. They're lost in their own projections. It's back to that way of talking about it Babaji had many years ago about the magician used his magic wand and created a garden and with a gate, and he got enchanted by the garden. He dropped his wand and he walked through the gate and it closed behind him, and then he thought he was stuck. So anyway, so this is a way to look at it cosmologically. Now, it's also true that that Vikshepa and Avarana are connected, as Shankaracharya pulls out in the Vivekachudamani. They are connected very much to tamas and rajas. And not only just tamas and rajas in terms of the individual mind, but tamas and rajas in collective and cosmological aspects. So learning to bring forth sattva, which is the revealing power, prakasha shakti, is all part of this journey. So that's just kind of a quick sort of opening to this. Let's just also say that while associating with the body, and we'll go a little bit more into this, we're doing this again, not just the physical body, but the subtle body, the causal body, all the different kinds of bodies that we can have in those different realms within the mind. And then the limiting powers, we've said what those are, and they beset the mind and senses. But he remembered the divine mother of the universe and rested in her two priceless jewels. Now it's the two priceless jewels that we may not get to until next time, but those are Atmagyan and Anubhava. And the way they're being used in this sense, well, Anubhava, of course, means direct experience. And Atmagyan is not, Atmagyan means knowledge of the self. Sometimes when we talk about that word, we're talking about the teachings related to knowledge of the self. But here we're actually talking about self-knowledge. And combined with Anubhava, then it means not only access to the Atman and knowing oneself truly, having realized oneself as the Atman, but living and having the direct experience of that moment to moment. And so that's the way it's being used here. And that's why he says, I rested in her two priceless jewels. So now we're going to, I wanted to back up again, because what all of this is really resting on in terms of the speaker of this stotram is this divine memory that she has acquired over lifetimes. And we don't get to see these, we do get to see these charts from time to time, but we don't get to dwell on them too much, and they're not in footfalls. So let's just take them again to remind ourselves. So when we are lacking in divine memory, what are the causes associated with that? And we won't spend a lot of time on it, but we'll just recite them for right now. Neglect in taking the wisdom teachings. So lifetime spent in neglect of taking the wisdom teachings. Thirst for the worlds of name and form. And we can say about this thirst for the worlds of name and form that this is closely tied to thinking that consciousness requires a container. And so, if we have to leave this body, we immediately want to have another body. This is the way most people think. They're not thinking in terms of formlessness. They're thinking about, what will my ego be? Not in so many words, but will I be me? What will I be? I want to be a something. So that's the thirst for the worlds of name and form, so that we're, always thinking ahead to the next container for this consciousness of ours, limited consciousness. And then some scars, fixation with caste or class, with conventions and family, all of those show up in our samskaras. They're like, from prior lifetimes, and taking those lifetimes to be real and the experiences in them to be real, then we've developed these habits, and they come with us, and they color the karma that comes with us. They color the experiences that are fresh and new in a particular lifetime with the kind of reaction that we bring to it. The illusion of earning, hoarding, and spending. Now, it's important that he's put here the illusion, because again, we're already operating in this place of avarana, where the indivisible reality has been covered and we're not seeing it. We're not aware of our origin, of our source, of our connection with it. And then from there, of course, we have all these different lesser lights, as we'll talk about later on, things to cling on to. And so we think that earning is the goal of life, and that if we have it, then we have to be secure with more of it, and we have to hoard it, and etc. So clinging to wealth, spouse, and offspring. You could say that this is also part of a samskara. Belief in the substantiality and actuality of suffering, okay, which comes with thinking that we're a body and that we're a mind and that our feelings are real. That, again, it's that case of where the seer has glommed onto the scene and gotten confused. Hunger, thirst, grief, delusion, decay, and death. These are all things that take the mind away if we haven't trained it to be fixed on the unchanging. Babaji said something recently in a class, I think it was, pay attention to the unchanging as you navigate the changing. That's a real good motto right there. And then assuming the world to be the only reality. And all of these things together result in dull sleep, vacuous thought, empty speech, worldly sound, that we get drawn to those things because we now have taught ourselves not to know anything better. Okay, so those are the intra, that means within, the inner causes. Now here's cosmic and collective causes. There's the superimposition of form over reality. You could also call this avarana, but this is another way of putting it, vivarta, the superimposition of form over reality. And then vaya arupa, fear of formlessness. Arupa is formlessness and vaya is fear. We usually talk about, abhaya. And then doubt in the nature of the self. This one dies hard, as we've heard many times. And belief in change and transformation. Belief in birth, life, and death. So these are cosmic and collective causes. So not only have we had a habit of this in our individual lifetimes, that's also combined with culture and with, ancestor realms where everybody else is holding this idea. And remember that the force of thought, and when you have the force of thought of a lot of people coming together, a lot of beings coming together, it makes it even easier to then fall in line with it. I mean, the same idea, but in the opposite mode, is when we sit with a great teacher, when we sit with our teacher, and after a few minutes, we feel that lift come over us because we've walked into her atmosphere and it pulls us up. This is that tejas in that case. But here, it's just the force of everybody doing it, the force of cosmic convention. So belief in birth, life, and death, desire for heavenly existence, and the influence of the ancestors. So, of course, there's also the solutions. Babaji always puts the solutions there. Expanding the mind to know Brahman, meditating upon the Ishtam, or the form of God, even the formless form of God. Scriptural study and memorization, this is really, really important. Observing celibacy and or moderation. Keeping holy company after initiation as well. Utilizing japa of the mantra continually. So not only formally, and especially formally, but also throughout the day. Practice of the 5 types of sacrifice. So now, one more reminder. Let's see. I just want to accent the positive now, instead of looking at the negative, because we've done enough of that on this idea of divine memory. So one comes into the world with divine memory as a result of religious and spiritual experiences occurring in life due to practice. The soul remembers its past existences. Then, thenceforth, all lives are accompanied by worship of the highest deities and meditation on formless reality. Everything in relativity, including objects, reflect the light and remind the soul of Brahman. When we have this divine memory, everything in relativity, including objects, reflect the light, the divine light of consciousness, of reality, and remind the soul of Brahman. And then near and dear souls are recognized as eternal companions from lifetime to lifetime. So the benefits of divine memory. So this is what our precious singer of this Stotram has in hand as she delivers this. So to read that verse again, and I'm going to copy it and stick it in the chat so you can keep referring to it. Okay, it's there now. Then, while associating with the body, the 2 limiting powers of Maya beset my mind and senses. So let's just begin with this. While associating with the body. In the 3rd verse, he talks about opening his eyes upon the universe and seeing the 3 worlds. So we have to assume that even though he's remembering this from the standpoint of being in a physical body, he's remembering before that. And so while associating with the body, it might be a causal body, it could be a subtle body, and also the physical body. There was something more. Show how the body's connected. That's what I wanted to do. All right, I'm going to show you another chart. We've looked at this before, but it's probably been over a year. And I want to show how these connect individual and cosmic. Because it's so easy to just think in terms of gross and not think in terms of subtle and causal as well. And just a quick rundown on this. So from the ultimate, Brahman, Turiya, Atman, from pure consciousness, coming through unmanifested Prakriti and through the projecting power, the concealing power of tamas, the projecting power of rajas, which we're calling vikshepa and avarana, then we have these different kinds of bodies. So as the individual, we have a individual waking state, an individual dreaming state, an individual deep sleep state. And we have these identities. In the waking state, we call them the enjoyer of gross objects. And in the heavenly realms, or in the mental realm, or in the dream state, we call it the shining one, or the enjoyer of subtle objects. And then in the deep sleep state, we have the enjoyer of bliss. Now, we have this dotted line here, which means that it's really like a line drawn on water. The only thing that is making that line is this clinging in ignorance to the effects of avarana and vikshepa. So we have focused ourselves on a body, physical or subtle, and we think that's all of what we are. So, but let's say we've abandoned the physical body and we're now in the shining realm with others. So we're in there with a lot of other people, other beings. So this is a collective of individuals. But from the cosmic standpoint, there's the divine being, Ishvara, we could say, appearing as the physical universe, appearing as God's mind, and is the whole of each of those, the whole of the universe, the whole of the kingdoms of heaven within, and the Ishvara that is containing all of this. So these things are interconnected, and the only thing separating us is our clinging to individuality. So I just wanted to remind us of this. Now, as we launch into Avarana Shakti and Vikshepa Shakti, let's take a look at it from the standpoint of the gunas, because this is really important for the Vedantic side of things. Sorry, I've got all these different buttons I can push, and sometimes I forget where I am. There we go. So before Avarana is engaged, before Vikshepa is engaged, we are just formless reality, indivisible. And so it's only when we start to associate with the body that these come on. We cannot have bodies of any kind unless these two things have taken place. So from the Vedantic point of view, and this delineation here is given to us by Shankaracharya. Avarana Shakti is the power of obscuration. It just covers indivisible reality. And it reminds me of, in that beautiful 108 verses of Sri Sharada, one of the Sanskrit names for her is Ekameva Vibhaginima. Anytime you hear that bhag or vibhaga, that means there's been a division made. There's separations or divisions. But she's Ekameva. She takes the one reality and she makes it appear as multiplicity. So here, This is what's happening here. So when indivisible reality is covered, then, that's already an illusory appearance, and it gives rise to vivarta, illusory appearance, or false superimposition, or abhyasa, false appearance. It gives rise to bondage, as if beings lose their memory of their origin. There's also that mother sends us out and she winks, don't forget who you are, don't forget your wand. And so bondage can arise. Think of it, before there's an obscuration or any distortion, any projection or superimposition over the reality, how can there be bondage? Because there's only oneness, only unity. And that's the reality at all times. So when this obscuration happens, this avarana shakti, then bondage looks like a reality. Like, oh, I'm in a body now, I have to behave in certain ways and do certain things. So this gives rise to, also associated with this is dullness and ignorance, lack of knowledge, lack of knowing who we are, and abhavana, false thinking. So this false thinking, it's literally that, thinking wrong. It's taking the unreal to be real and then living by that false assumption. So then the power of vikshepa is lined up with rajas. And we'll be looking, also I mentioned, and we'll get a little more into this later, one of its powers or one of the subsidiary powers of Avarana Shakti, actually, and it's quite related to Vikshepa, is the ability to present before the mind lesser lights and distractions. And so therefore, there's all this sparkly stuff, so to speak, and we gain an interest in that. So it becomes a source of desire. Instead of knowing myself as the container of everything, that all exists in me with a capital M, of course, then suddenly I start desiring these things as if they're something separate from me. So, which leads to constant attachment. And then with the not getting what we want, creates mental disturbances and results in sorrow and pain. So, so this is how it's laid out when we think of it in terms of tamas and rajas out of the Viveka Chudamani. So now we're going to go a little deeper into this idea of vikshepa and avarana. And it turns out for not 58 already, but close to half, I think, of the chapters of the Sword of the Goddess, Babaji did write chapters. And he had one for the two limiting powers of Maya. And we're going to study that chapter to some extent tonight, because it goes into more detail. It's like we can see, oh yeah, it's the source of desire. It's a source of illusory appearance. But what does that really mean when we start working with it? I mean, how do we exactly recognize it? How is it showing up and presenting itself in our life? And so his chapter is really good at teasing this apart in terms of its principles, so we can really examine it. So he starts out from the very beginning saying that these are Maya's powers, and or Divine Mother's power of Maya. And excuse me, let me back up just a little bit here. Yeah, okay. right? So we'll launch in. So let me just quote a little bit. Divine Mother's Maya has two basic divisions, vidya and avidya, knowledge and ignorance, which liberate and create respectively. So here we get that idea again, that the seers saw that it was ignorance that creates. So what is that ignorance? That ignorance is that covering over the boundless, indivisible, and unchanging reality of Brahman. And so that's the ignorance. And so therefore, if that's in place, creation or projection can take place. So, and then further, these two, vidya and avidya Maya, also has two divisions, avarana and vikshepa. So here are some important points that Babaji pulls out in his chapter on avarana. He says, it veils Brahman. I know we've said this many times, but repetition is important. Let's drive it in and learn to work with it. He says, on the level of the cosmic Maya, called Mula Vidya, root ignorance, a multitude of coverings come about, seemingly out of nothing, as Maya fashions the curtains that effectively veil indivisible, immutable, homogeneous awareness. So I'm adding into that. So Maya fashions curtains that effectively veil Brahman, which is indivisible, immutable, and homogeneous. And then he lists some of these. He says, these veils are things like conceptual thought. As soon as we have concepts, we have limits, right? So if we're using the dual mind and we're placing a limit over limitless consciousness. So conceptual thought is one of those veils. Fragmentation is one of those veils, taking indivisible reality and creating a division in it. There's one thing and now there's another. There's me, who's looking on phenomena that as well. And then there's time. Another veil is time, space, and causation. So these are all illusory because Brahman is none of these. Brahman pre-exists and outlasts all of them. And as Sri Krishna says so in such a pithy way in the Uddhava Gita, whatever exists before something and is there after something is the only thing present in between. If it exists before and it seems to go away, and we're looking at something else, and then that something else goes away and we see the reality again, that means that the only thing that was there that we mistook as something else was that reality. So it's, imagine clay or the ocean. I mean, that's even easier. The ocean is throwing waves. When the ocean waves come up, maybe we're not looking at the ocean. It's like, can't see the forest for the trees. A tree veils for us temporarily the whole of a vast forest. So this is the way that Maya fashions curtains: conceptual thought, fragmentation, time, space, causation. And these are all illusory because Brahman is none of these. It pre-exists and outlasts them all. So then, in a way that's kind of cute, he says, if you can't make Brahman go away, let's cover it, haha. So Brahman can't go away. It pre-exists everything. It's there when everything else goes away. It was only there in the middle anyway. And that's what Maya is doing, is creating this middle ground that we then focus all of our attention upon. So Beings get hypnotized by this, he says, and they forget their origin and their connection to it, and the presence of the essential being in our own selves. So now I'm going to actually read and let you read with me one of these sections in that chapter. Let me line it up so that I get the right one. Underlined. Page 1, 4th paragraph. Okay. Okay, we can look at this and I'll read it out loud. So he precedes this by saying, and here's where Avarana, the covering power, begins to act on the collective and individual levels. The veiling that goes on in life's circles of activity and human relations is comprehensive, but Maya makes it incomprehensible. So let's think about this. The veiling that goes on in life's circles of activity. We can think about our own circles of activity and then the life of collective humanity and human relationships going on. It's comprehensive. It's happening in all different kinds of spheres and all different kinds of cultures, in civilizations, in households, in communities, in schools, in nations, in continents. So it's comprehensive. It covers so much. And then Maya makes it incomprehensible. The collective consciousness of humanity, though it strives to better the condition of existence, is always struck hard and stopped short by the many imperfections and inconsistencies of both life and mind. So what are those inconsistencies? These are things like the 6 transformations. We're always up against birth, growth, disease, decay, old age, death, all of these, hunger and thirst. We're up against things coming into being and going out of being. We're up against the 6 passions and the 8 fetters, all of these different things. Okay, so now keep that in mind as he continues. The collective consciousness of humanity, though it strives to better the condition of existence, is always struck hard and stopped short by the many imperfections and inconsistencies of both life and mind. About life, instead of allowing it to be what it is and abiding calmly within its limits while remaining detached from them, human beings attempt to make changes in the fabric of creation, which is limited by design. You know, it has to be limited in order to exist or to show up. So how are we trying to change the fabric of creation? It is hoping to alter the negative aspects of it, such as disease, suffering, and death. And it's important that he says, alter the negative aspects of it. Because here we hear Swami Vivekananda telling us, if you want to get rid of the bad, you have to get rid of the good as well. So trying to go after the negative and thinking that you're actually going to make a complete difference and transformation that will never change again is not going to happen. We can get rid of one disease, but it'll pop up again. We get rid of suffering and take refuge in pleasure, but suffering just rolls back. Well, pleasure rolls back too. And it just goes on and on. We want one, we have to take the other. And then death. If we want life, death comes with it, so long as we're attached to the body. But the fact is that not only are these difficulties inherent in the makeup of creation, they are also great teachers, bestowing upon us the lesson of non-attachment to material things, to name, and to form. God will not let us forget our true nature, at least not ultimately, though those who want to spend lifetimes attempting to change or alter God's handiwork are welcome to try, and often do, much to their chagrin and folly. Now, about the mind, Avarana, acting on the collective level, called Vyasti, has a powerful effect on the consciousness of humanity as a whole and is always at work. Races, and here he's giving the examples now, races isolate from one another and vie for supremacy. Societies subdivide and alienate their members. Religions hoard or interpolate the tenets of truth, and governments manipulate for control and power and go to war to conquer for profit, all from a sense of difference based upon the veiling of what is real and what is true. So I'm going to stop here and ask if there's any comments or questions from this. Okay, then we will move along here. So avarana at the individual level, the key word is selfishness based upon prioritizing this ego. And I'm just going to read a quote here. In other words, the truth of the essential unity of all beings in God gets effectively veiled, and all that occurs thereafter is nothing but vanity and vexation of spirit. Let me repeat that. So selfishness comes along with the covering. You can also think of this in terms of the kleshas. Ignorance covers the nature of reality, the nature of truth. And arising from that, we get this individual ego, this sense of I that then is taught by society, by convention, by prior experiences, different lifetimes, to prioritize its comfort, its security, its happiness over everything else, and to think that that's okay. And the more we get tied into that, the more we find, and I know as spiritual aspirants and as, quote unquote, as good people, we've probably all looked at ourselves from at one time or another in our interactions with others and thought, why am I adjusting my position against what is happening? Why can't I just be myself, right? What am I trying to protect? And what we'll find is that I'm trying to protect this ego attached to certain desires. I've got to make it secure in its dealings with others. And this just embroils us more and more in karma and egotism. So he goes on, the healthy and humbling truth of treat thy neighbor as thyself, based upon do unto others that which you would have done unto you, predicated upon I and my Father are one, is entirely forgotten, and life proceeds along crooked and broken lines based upon a multitude of fallacious assumptions that I'm an individual, that I am a body, that I am a gender, or I'm not a gender, or I am a caste, I belong to a particular class, I am married or not married, all the different ramifications that come with those that we then identify and then try to protect and maintain this separate uniqueness, which is not the ultimate uniqueness. Avarana's power of obscuration is present all along to allow for further acts of covering up, whether it be on the level of politics, business, relationships, or personal delusion and deception. And he quotes from the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam, something that's very, very poignant. She says to the king of the Himalayas, I think it is, "O king, all beings, moving and unmoving, fall under the delusion of Maya. She plays with them. This Maya is always imposing on all, and she is constantly making transformations in this universe. People under the influence of her two powers take recourse to untruth from the very moment of their birth," right? As soon as we're born, our parents are hanging over us and saying, "Oh, you're so cute. Look at these little hands. Are you going to grow up and be a doctor?" Anyway, from the very beginning, we're taught to think of ourselves as this little package of flesh and bone. So they take recourse to untruth from the very moment of their birth. When they do not get their desired object, they take recourse to pretext and do many sinful acts. Lust, anger, and avarice. These are powerful enemies. Those under their influence cannot distinguish right from wrong. So here's really a deep crux when we think about this avarana and vikshepa, these limiting powers, taking it just from the cosmological practicality of how do we get this garden of experience of the universe to, if we're suffering in it, is we have to detach ourselves from these two. We have to see how they work. We have to know ourselves as separate from their results and take ownership. Well, either see them as God's, as divine mother's power and take refuge in her, or little by little come to see that we are doing it ourselves. These are our powers, and we're either using them unconsciously, misusing them, or don't even recognize them. So, and causing all of our suffering and not knowing how to distinguish right from wrong. So that's pretty scary. So we're getting close to the end here. We just got as far as Avarana. I want to jump ahead. We'll get back to Vikshepa specifically, because there's lots to go into about that, which is really, really useful for seeing it in action. But let me just jump ahead to this thing about all the suffering that takes place as a result of Avarana and Vikshepa. And Babaji talks about that at the very end of this chapter. And he says, the tantric adepts and philosophers affirm that Maya is infinite and ever present like Brahman, because it's its power. But they also declare that Maya is insentient. And it's this fact that renders Maya ultimately incapable of being the source of our unhappiness. We ourselves are that. In this regard, we would be wise to remember that Maya places in front of us all the wondrous treasures and tools of universal projection, has placed before us, in front of us, for which we get to use and which we use consciously or unconsciously, the cosmic mind, the senses and their subtle powers, the 5 elements, and all configured into a solid world for sporting along with other individuals for potential interaction and more. This Maya is under the control of Mahamaya, or Mahashakti, the dynamic side of Brahman. It is she who wields this Maya. And her fabrication of the universe using Maya is not meant to be taken as the source of ultimate experience. Brahman is that. She never intended for us to so naively accept everything she presented and cling to it, even increasing its power of deception. He goes on, they are wise, quote unquote, they are sentient, as if Maya were talking to us. Looking at us, we are the ones who are sentient. We should be wise. And Maya goes about the work of the Mahashakti, and it's not her fault. She's just carrying out the bidding. So remember in the gospel where Sri Ramakrishna has just sung that song that, you know, Mother Kali is flying mind kites in the sky of awareness. And these mind kites, when one of them breaks free and flies into the sky of awareness, completely free and unbound, she claps her hand. And then there's another place that where she steps on the world, it shatters the world and all beings go with it. And somebody next to Sri Ramakrishna says, but her dance is our destruction. And he turns to that person, he says, but who are you? As if we could ever be separate from the Divine Mother. So Babaji goes on, as the power of Mahamaya, Maya just gives. She has laws, rules, and directives that are the inherent fabric of her nature. And these include the ability to veil and distort reality. But if this were not the case, there would be no universe, no sporting, no interaction. And so it is us. We are the masters of our own fate, as well as the recipients of the effects of our own folly. By forgetting, Vishmriti, by forgetting our spiritual nature and accepting the fallacious premise that we are material beings. That's a fallacious premise that we are material beings. By attaching to material objects and basing our existence upon concepts that are material in nature, the truth of life and existence becomes immaterial to us. In other words, we forget it. We must then remember the truth that we are pure spirit, the Atman abiding within. As the rishis attempted to tell us, Kevala Asti, thou art alone. One ultimately has nothing to do with this world of becoming, but is pure consciousness alone. So the next time we meet is going to be, for this class, is going to be in June because of Babaji's trip, and I'll be accompanying him to Portland. And I think everybody here is going to be there, actually. And when we meet again, we're going to take up Vikshepa specifically, because there are some insights into that we should definitely go over. And then we'll reward ourselves with Atmagyan and Anubhava teachings. So let me close with a prayer. Om Asato Ma Sadgamoya Tamasu Ma Jyotir Gamoya Mrichur Ma Amritam Gamoya Abhira Bhira Mayeti Rudra Yate Dakshinam Mukam Tenamam Pahi Nityam. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from lower truth to higher truth. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from the illusion of death to realization of eternal, undivided existence. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother of the universe, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, May peace be unto all living beings. Om Hari Om Tat Sat. Namaste, everyone. Thank you so much for joining tonight. I'll stay on in case anybody has a question or a thought and about anything. And see you all soon. Namaste. Oh, I'm sorry. We have Anurag's class next Wednesday. We have satsang and God blogs on Saturday. Namaste.